Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Danielle Robio, and you are with us at AC Live at 0 to 3's annual conference 2019. Our captain, Mauricio, is indisposed at the moment with a little seasickness, so I'm taking over. Welcome, everyone. I am joined by my colleagues Jennifer Novak and Julia Yuri, as well as Karen from Save the Children today. And we're really excited to talk with you all and share a little bit more information about working with children and natural disasters. We're in Florida this year. It's hurricane season. Natural disasters happen everywhere, though, and it can be especially traumatizing for young children as well as adults. Can we just step back for a moment? And Jennifer, can you tell us why it's so important to, understand why the ages of 0 to 3 are such a critical time and what effects such stress can have on young children?
That's a great question. So, for the longest time, we believed that children that were younger than 3 were too little or too unaware of the world to have any really long-term impacts because of experiencing stress and trauma. But what we now know from research is that these early experiences, even before children are born at times, can have impacts on how they process stress and trauma, not just as young children, but also throughout the length of their lifespan. Part of this has to do with different genetics and chemicals and stress reactions and things like that. But really what it boils down to is that we have to keep in mind the importance of how our children are doing whenever we're experiencing these really high stress situations and being mindful of their needs as we're working on handling what we need ourselves. Some of the impacts of stress and natural disaster and things like that can include regression in behavior, increases in aggression, biting, things like problems with sleeping, toilet training, issues with eating, sleep. So we really want to be mindful of how children are whenever they experience these things, and then doing what we can to buffer those stress reactions with these programs like Shelter from the Storm and the information it provides to the community.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. Julia, I'll turn it to you. Can you tell us a little bit more about Shelter from the Storm and your collaboration with Save the Children?
Absolutely. 0 to 3 was just thrilled when Save the Children reached out to us and we decided that this is something that we could do together to really work on how do we help communities think about how babies and toddlers respond and how do we give families the knowledge and know-how to support their families. And so we decided, first of all, to develop the Save the Children curriculum or the training, and we interviewed people who worked in shelters. The Red Cross was very helpful with us in giving us a lot of information. We worked with a lot of people from the Save the Children staff who, of course, do a lot of amazing work in disaster recovery, and we started to develop a curriculum really focused on how do we understand how children are impacted by stress and trauma. We've developed some fabulous resources as a part of it, including a full-day training called Shelter from the Storm. Makes sense, right? Both for early care educators and also for those professionals who serve in disaster situations and supporting families. And along with that, we have some principal materials that are available, again, both for the early care educators and for professionals who are working in shelters to provide support for families. And it really was a collaboration with Save the Children. It was pretty fabulous.
Thank you so much, Julia. That sounds like a really rich information for everyone. I'm curious, Karen, when you were, interviewing folks and finding out what their needs were, what were the most pressing needs in communities when it came to resources for, helping children through natural disasters?
Yeah, so Save the Children primarily works in rural areas. So many of the communities that we serve have really limited resources when it comes to things like training and things like that. And many of the areas that we serve also are really childcare deserts. So many families are forced to use alternative childcare. Family members, other community members that maybe don't have the level of training that a professional childcare person would have. So with the collaboration with 0 to 3 and Shelter from the Storm brought to these communities is more information and resources. We all know and have spent so much time focusing on ACEs and trauma and all of these really critical things for early childhood, but many of the folks in the rural areas don't have access to that information. So providing the information is the starting point to really support these communities through trauma.
Thank you, Karen, and I'll just stay with you for a moment. What else, can we do to help support the community capacity to help, mitigate these effects of toxic stress, especially in, times of disaster or just disruption in a child's life and a community's life?
Absolutely. The reason the collaboration has been so positive for us is that we're able to bring Shelter from the Storm to these communities and bring community collaboratives together. So other folks that are really interested in early childhood in communities to support their understanding and knowledge and really create plans in individual communities based on their needs to really remediate as much as possible kind of the urgent needs, and then also to really share information about how to respond to the unique needs of children that are under 3 years old.
Thank you. And I'll actually turn back to Jennifer. Can you tell us a little bit more about, beyond natural disasters, how we can build community capacity to help children mitigate the effects of toxic stress and families?
Sure, that's a really great question too. So as we were going out and doing these Shelter from the Storm trainings, we would receive this feedback of, this is great, and how can we apply this to these families that are already experiencing chronic stress outside of natural disaster? Things like living in extreme poverty, living with drug substance abuse disorders or mental health concerns or things like that. So one of the things that we did as we were going out and facilitating was encouraging trainees to think of the storm not just as this physical disaster, but also this metaphorical storm of all of the trauma or ACEs that a young child might experience depending on what their family is going through, not just one-time events, but also those chronic things that can impact children in the long term.
Thank you. Julia, what are some other resources beyond Shelter from the Storm, which is, so amazing and helpful that, professionals should be aware of to help communities and families work through, toxic stress and ACEs?
Well, I think that families who take a look at for instance, our 0 to 3 website will find a plethora of information on how adverse experiences impact children, how it impacts the caregiver, and how it impacts the provider who's trying to support that family. Because really, we want the entire community system to be aware. We had a great presentation today about it's not just how we support the child and the helper for the child, but that professional who's trying to be in that home and work with them, that how we are, our board member, Jerry Paul, says how you are is as important as what you do. So all of our materials really take time to reflect that. So for instance, we have information on how self-care is critical and what you can do as a professional to provide kind of self-care routines to make sure you're available for your families that you serve, and then how that then plays out and how you work in your relationship with the parents, who then of course have these fabulous relationships with their babies and toddlers. There also is some specific resources that are for members only that's been developed on ACEs, on what are ACEs, how do you talk to family about ACEs, how do you do ACE screenings without feeling awkward that we're asking all of these kind of tough questions, and really kind of step-by-step process of understanding adverse childhood experiences. And so members should look for that on the members only part of our website as well.
Great, thank you. I hope all our members heard that. You can access all these great resources on 0to3.org. Our final question today, and it's not a complete 180. I love the metaphor, the storm is not just a physical thing, but we also work with military families at 0 to 3, and they might be going through some different experiences and some similar experiences. Can you tell us a little bit more about Babies on the Home Front and your work with military families?
Thank you, Danielle, for asking that question. I think it's something that it's kind of different for our military families because we can anticipate the stressors these families are going to experience from having their parent deploy for sometimes 7 to 9 months, sometimes 12 months at a time away from the family system, and how that disrupts the family, both the parent that's leaving, the child, and the home front parent too. All of them are impacted by this separation, as well as frequent moves. I think many people are aware that families in the military move every 2 to 3 years. Mm-hmm. What they do is inherently dangerous. They do exercises and things that can sometimes result in injury or even loss of parent life. So we have a lot of resources at 0 to 3 for that. And we developed an app for parents called Babies on the Home Front, and I encourage everybody to take a look at it because I don't know if people know it, but 1 in 7 families is probably military connected, either active duty military reserve, or a veteran. And how you approach and work with that family and the information they're looking for is sometimes it helps to have that kind of cultural perspective. And so Babies on the Home Front is a great way to do that. They can find out more, everyone who's interested, at www.babiesonthehomefront.org, and it's I think that they'll find that it's really rich also for people who are serving families who are not military, there's a lot of things you can still use from it as well.
Thank you so much, Julia. This has been, just chock full of information. Can you all just close this out and tell folks, where they can find more information about your work and the resources you mentioned? We'll start with Karen.
Thank you. Yes, www.savethechildren.org. You can learn all about our programs across the U.S. and across the globe.
And we encourage people to check out 0 to 3's website, and specifically if you type in the search Shelter from the Storm, you'll find lots of great information on dealing with disasters, preparing for disasters, and of course all of our great Shelter from the Storm material, www.0to3.org. And our Babies on the Home Front, I'm going to let Jen share that.
So like Julia said, that's just babiesonthehomefront.org. You can also search Babies on the Homefront on Facebook. We do have a Facebook group associated with the app, which provides a lot of really great sort of immediate question answering. If you're interested in learning more, we have more in the About description for that as well.
Great. Thank you all so much. It's been a pleasure talking with you all today. For folks at home, continue to stay tuned at 0to3.org/AC Live. You can follow along on social media with our hashtag 0to3 2019, and we'll see you back in a bit. Thank you all.